I heard shouting from your house, my neighbor said, catching me off guard the moment I stepped out of my car with my overnight bag still in hand. I froze. Not because of the words exactly, but because I'd been gone for 3 weeks. 3 weeks in another state, my phone barely working in the mountains. No way for anyone to mistake me being home. My first instinct was to correct her, to say she must have gotten the wrong house, but something in her eyes told me she was certain. Last Friday, she went on, around 9 at night. Loud. It went on for a while. The thing is, my house isn't the kind that carries sound. Not unless someone was inside. I laughed it off in the way you do when your gut's already starting to knot, telling her maybe the wind had carried noise from somewhere else. But even as I turned my key in the front door, my mind was replaying. Every detail of my trip. The photos I posted, the receipts I saved, the exact dates I was gone. There's no scenario where I'd been anywhere near this street when she heard those screams. The smell hit me first. Faint, metallic, like a coin pressed too long in the palm of your hand. The living room looked exactly the same. But I know my house. The throw blanket I always keep folded on the left arm of the couch was crumpled in the middle. The picture frame on the mantel had been turned face down. My first thought was break-in, but nothing seemed stolen. Not the TV, not my laptop, not the jewelry in the dish by the kitchen sink. I told myself to stop spiraling, that I was imagining things. But when I stepped into my bedroom, I stopped cold. On the floor, half tucked under my bed like someone shoved it there in a hurry, was a wine glass I'd never seen before. Not mine. Not from any set I've ever owned. And next to it, the faintest smear of something dark on the carpet. I didn't touch it. I didn't move closer. I just backed out of the room, phone in my hand, heart hammering so hard I could hear it in my ears. My neighbor's voice kept replaying in my head, mixing with that metallic scent. I should have called someone right then. Instead, I locked the front door, sat in my car, and tried to convince myself I could sleep it off. But that night, lying in a hotel room across town, my phone lit up with a text from an unknown number. You weren't supposed to come back yet. I stared at the message until the screen dimmed, then lit it back up again just to make sure it was real. No name, no emoji, nothing that could be brushed off as spam. Just that one sentence. My first reaction was to check the locks on the hotel door, twice, then drag the desk chair in front of it like I was back in a college dorm. Whoever it was, they knew I wasn't home, but they also knew I had come back earlier than expected. That detail was the part I couldn't shake. Only someone inside my house or watching it closely could have known the exact moment I returned. The next morning, I drove back to my street slowly, watching for parked cars I didn't recognize, for anyone lingering on the sidewalk. My neighbor was out watering her flowers again, giving me the same curious look, but I waved and kept moving. Inside, the smell was stronger now. It was coming from the hallway, a kind of coppery tang that made my stomach turn. I thought about calling the police right there, but the fear of what they might find, and what it might mean for me, kept me frozen. 3 weeks gone, no one with a key but me, and now a stranger's wine glass under my bed. It didn't take much imagination to picture how bad this could look. I forced myself into the guest room, the one I never use, and that's when I saw the second sign that someone had been living here. The bed was made wrong. My grandmother taught me to tuck hospital corners so tight you could bounce a coin, but the sheet on that bed was barely pulled over the mattress, wrinkles everywhere. And on the nightstand, right where I would see it, sat a single Polaroid. Blurry but unmistakable. My backyard, taken from inside the house, with my own bedroom window lit up in the frame. Only I'd been out of state the night it must have been taken. I picked up the Polaroid with the corner of my sleeve, every instinct screaming not to put my fingerprints on it. The photo had that chemical smell, sharp and fresh enough that it couldn't have been sitting there for long. Which meant someone had been inside my house recently. Too recently. I went room to room, this time paying attention to the smallest details, the way the bathroom mirror had faint streaks from a towel I don't own, the faintest indentation on the couch cushion across from my usual spot, like someone had been watching the front door from there. In the kitchen, I found the most unnerving thing yet. My fridge had been reorganized. The condiments were in different rows, the milk wasn't where I keep it, and there were 2 containers of leftovers I didn't make. Both were from a takeout. Place across town I've never ordered from, dated just a week ago in black marker. My mind kept looping back to the text message. Whoever sent it was comfortable enough to move through my space, eat in my kitchen, sleep in my bed, and leave things for me to find. That wasn't a random break-in. That was someone making a point. I thought about calling my best friend, but she was one of only 3 people who even knew I'd been out of town, and right then, that made me trust her less, not more. Instead, I pulled up the feed from my security camera app. It should have been the first thing I checked, but when I opened it, every clip from the past month was gone. Not corrupted, not motionless, just deleted. In their place was a single saved file, time-stamped exactly 5 days ago. I pressed play, and my own front door came into view. At first there was nothing, just the hum of the mic. Then a figure stepped into frame. Hoodie up, head down, carrying a grocery bag. They looked straight into the camera before walking inside. And even though the hood hid most of their face, I recognized the way they tilted their head when they closed the door. The same way my ex used to when he thought he'd gotten away with something. My breath caught before I could stop it, and I sat there replaying the clip over and over, zooming in on the grainy outline of his jaw. We hadn't spoken in over a year, not since the night I told him to take his things and leave for good. The restraining order I filed after he kept showing up at my work was still in effect, or at least it was supposed to be. The last I'd heard, he'd moved 2 states away. But now here he was, in my house, while I was 3 weeks out of town. My hands were shaking as I scrolled through my contacts, hovering over the police non-emergency line. I imagined trying to explain it. Deleted footage, an unrecognizable hooded figure, a glass under my bed. I could already hear the officer's bored tone. "Ma'am, do you have proof of forced entry?" Instead, I forwarded the clip to my work email, my cloud account, even a friend who lives out of state, anywhere it couldn't just vanish from my phone. Then I started opening drawers, closets, every place he might have left something to let me know he'd been here. In the hall closet, behind the winter coats, I found it. A small black duffel bag. Inside were clothes that weren't mine, a toothbrush still damp, and an envelope with my name written on it in his handwriting. No stamp, no address, just my name. I didn't open it right away. I set it on the counter and stared at it like it might start smoking. That's when I heard it. The faintest creak from upstairs. Not the kind a house makes when it's settling, but the careful weight of someone trying not to be heard. I didn't think. I grabbed my keys in my bag and walked out the front door like I was just stepping out to check the mail. My heart was thudding so hard I thought it might give me away, but I kept my pace steady until I was in my car, door shut, engine running. I drove 2 blocks before pulling over, hands gripping the wheels so tight my knuckles hurt. If he was still in the house, then he'd been there while I was downstairs, watching me, listening. I called the police this time, no hesitation, gave them my address and told them I had reason to believe someone was inside. I followed them back at a distance, parking down the street while 2 officers went in with their weapons drawn. 10 minutes later, they came out alone. No suspect. No forced entry. They asked if I wanted to file a report, but without visible damage or stolen property. It was just suspicious circumstances. Still, I let them clear each room again while I stood on the porch, arms wrapped around myself. One officer came back holding the black duffel. I told him it wasn't mine, and he logged it as found property. The envelope, though, that I kept. When they finally left, I locked every door and window, then sat at the kitchen table with that envelope in front of me. My hands didn't feel like my own when I tore it open. Inside was a single sheet of lined paper with 6 words scrawled across it. "I can still get to you." No date, no signature, nothing else. Just that. I slid it back inside, sealed it in a plastic bag, and put it with the rest of the evidence. That night, I booked another hotel room, farther away this time, and texted my boss that I needed a few personal days. But even in the quiet of that room, I couldn't shake the sense that leaving wouldn't matter. He'd already proven he could get in once, and there was nothing stopping him from doing it again. The next morning, I started calling locksmiths, security companies, anyone who could make my house less of an open invitation. One company offered same-day installation for reinforced deadbolts, cameras with local backups, and motion sensors in every room. I took the earliest slot. When I pulled into my driveway just before noon to meet the technician, I noticed something I'd missed before. A scrap of fabric caught on the latch of my backyard gate. It was from the hoodie in the video. I pulled the scrap loose and turned it over in my hands. It was soft, almost worn thin, the kind of fabric that doesn't tear unless someone forces it, which meant the latch had caught it as whoever wore it was slipping out. Or in. My mind kept flashing back to that video, the way he'd paused at the door before going inside. This proved he'd used the back too. I bagged the fabric in another Ziploc and put it with the envelope and the Polaroid, my makeshift evidence kit now taking up half the kitchen counter. The security tech arrived right on time, a stocky man with a clipboard and the kind of easy smile you give someone who doesn't yet know their house has been violated. I didn't tell him everything, just that I'd had some trouble and wanted every possible entry point sealed. He walked the perimeter, making notes, pointing out the weak spots I'd never even thought about. The basement window that didn't quite lock, the sliding glass door that could be lifted off its track if someone knew how. By the time he finished, I'd agreed to more upgrades than I'd planned. Reinforced locks, sensors on every window, cameras that fed to a local drive hidden in the attic. As he worked, I kept catching myself glancing toward the tree line at the back of the yard. It was dense enough for someone to stand there and watch without being seen. I half expected to catch movement, a shadow breaking from the stillness, but nothing came. By the time the tech packed up and left, the sun was sliding low, casting long, sharp shadows across the living room floor. I told myself the house was secure now, safer than it had ever been. Still, when I locked the door behind him, I felt the same twist in my gut. The knowledge that locks only keep out people who aren't determined to get in. That night, I stayed in the house for the first time since finding the wine glass. I left every new motion sensor armed, every window checked twice, and kept the lights on in the hall and kitchen. For a few hours, nothing happened. I sat on the couch with a blanket wrapped around me, half watching the local news while scrolling through my phone, trying to keep my mind on anything else. But around midnight, the motion alert from the backyard camera pinged. My heart jumped into my throat. I tapped the notification and the live feed came up. The yard was empty. No wind, no stray animal, nothing. I rewound the clip anyway, and for 3 seconds there it was. A figure at the edge of the tree line, just outside the sensor's main range. It wasn't clear enough to see a face, but the outline was unmistakable, tall, with the hood up again. They never moved toward the house, never waved, never turned. Just stood there until the camera timed out. I saved the clip in 3 different places before closing the app. Sleep was out of the question now. I moved to the upstairs window that overlooked the yard, standing behind the curtain so I could see without being seen. The trees swayed gently in the breeze, the branches shifting shadows across the grass. But the spot where the figure had been was still. I stayed there until my legs ached, waiting for a hint of movement, until the first pale light of dawn started to creep over the fence. When I finally turned away, something caught my eye on the dresser, the envelope with his handwriting. I'd sealed it in a bag 2 days ago, and now it was sitting out again, the bag nowhere in sight. I didn't touch it. I didn't even breathe too close to it. I just stood there, staring at the fact that something I'd sealed, hidden at the back of the kitchen counter, was now upstairs in my bedroom without any sign of forced entry. My skin prickled in that way it does when you're being watched, even though I was alone. I checked every lock again, every new sensor, all untouched. Either he had a way in I still hadn't found, or he never left. The thought lodged in my chest like ice. I tore through the house, opening every closet, checking under every bed, yanking open the crawlspace door. Nothing, but that didn't calm me, because the letter wasn't just moved, it had been changed. The original 6 words were still there, but underneath, in smaller writing, was something new. You're not looking in the right place. My hands shook so hard I almost dropped it. I stuffed it into another bag and locked it in the trunk of my car, figuring if he wanted to play games, I'd at least take the board away. That morning, I called the detective who handled my restraining order last year. I sent her the videos, the photos, the note, the fabric. She didn't say much, but her voice changed. That clipped tone people use when they're taking you seriously. She promised to run the evidence and see if the hoodie scrap matched anything in their system. In the meantime, She told me not to stay in the house. I agreed, but as I packed a bag to leave again, I realized something else. The duffel the police had taken as found property wasn't listed on the receipt they'd given me. It was just missing. I called the station, gave them the case number, and asked about the duffel. The desk sergeant put me on hold for nearly 10 minutes before coming back with a flat, "We don't have anything matching that description in evidence." I pushed, reminding him the officer had carried it out in front of me, but he just repeated the same line, "No bag on record," which meant either it had vanished after it left my house or someone made sure it was never logged at all. My mind went in a dozen directions at once, but the one I couldn't shake was that he'd gotten it back. Maybe not himself, maybe through someone at the station, but either way, whatever was inside it was gone. And now he knew exactly what I'd seen. I left the house within the hour, locking every door and window behind me, and drove to a friend's apartment across town. She was the kind of person who asked questions later, coffee first, so she didn't press when I showed up with an overnight bag and a look that must have told her everything. That night, from her couch, I checked the cameras again. Every feed was running, every sensor armed, nothing missing. But just before 2 a.m., the front porch camera triggered. I tapped the alert, expecting maybe a raccoon or the delivery guy dropping something late. Instead, I saw a small, neatly folded piece of paper lying dead center on the welcome mat. No one in the frame. No approach, no retreat. It was just there, like it had appeared between frames. I zoomed in as far as the grainy image would allow, and my stomach turned when I recognized the handwriting. I didn't wait for morning. I drove back to the house with my friend in the passenger seat, both of us scanning the sidewalks like we were expecting him to just be standing there. The street was empty, the yard still, but that folded piece of paper was exactly where the camera had shown it. I put on gloves before picking it up. The paper was heavier than I expected, like it had been folded and refolded 100 times. Inside, there was no message, just a single Polaroid, clearer than the last ones. It was my bedroom again, taken from the hallway. But this time I was in the frame. Asleep. Face turned toward the camera. The date scrawled on the bottom corner was from 3 nights ago. The night I'd stayed at the hotel across town, convinced I was safe. My friend saw it and swore under her breath, telling me to go straight to the police, but I couldn't shake the feeling that was exactly what he wanted. The detective's warning rang in my head. Don't stay in the house. I decided then I wasn't. Just leaving. I was emptying it. Within 24 hours, I had movers packing my things into storage, the lease termination filed, and my mail rerouted to a P.O. box he didn't know existed. Every trip back inside, I half expected to find another note, another glass, another sign he'd been there while my back was turned. On the last run, I paused in the doorway for one final look at the empty rooms. That's when I noticed it, carved faintly into the wood of the doorframe at knee height, like he'd crouched there to do it. 6 words, the same as the first. Note, I can still get to you. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I closed the door, locked it for the last time, and slid the key into the landlord's mailbox without looking back. There was no point keeping a house that had become a stage for someone else's game. I kept my new address quiet. No social media, no change of address forms except for the P.O. box, no contact with anyone who might pass it along. The detective still calls sometimes with updates, but so far nothing's stuck. No DNA match from the fabric, no usable prints from the Polaroids, no trace of the duffel. I've rebuilt my routines in a new city, learned the creaks of a new set of floors, the safe way shadows fall through different windows. But every time my phone buzzes, late at night I feel that same drop in my stomach, the same awareness that distance isn't the same as safety. My neighbor's words from that first day loop in my head sometimes. I heard shouting from your house. Back then, it was just confusion. Now it's the reminder I needed. There's no version of this where I go back to who I was before. He took my space, my sleep, my trust in walls and locks, but he didn't take the one thing I control, where I let him find me. And the answer, from here on out, is nowhere. This is Sarah, the creator of Revenge with Sarah. And yes, this is one of those stories I just can't get out of my head. Sometimes evil doesn't hide in the dark. It stands right at your doorstep, testing how far you'll let it in. She chose to walk away instead of waiting for the next sign to appear. And honestly, I would have done the exact same thing. What would you have done? Let me know in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe. There are plenty more stories ahead that will keep you hooked until the very last second.